You could say, well, I'll just retreat and I don't need a leader and I'll just do my own thing. Well, not if they're going to come for you. Not if they're going to take your money so you can't earn a living, but through excessive taxing. Not if they're going to take your children and put them into wars. You'd be foolish not to vote against that which may harm you if you have the choice.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sean from SGTReport.com and the SGT Report YouTube channel with a very important update. We're going to talk about all things Trump, the economy, and precious metals with Louis Cammarosano from Small Gold. Louis, welcome back.
How are you, Sean?
Well, I'm doing very, very well, and in fact, I think it's important that we start to talk about the things that Donald Trump is already doing since taking office, since so many of us who have talked about the benefit of getting Trump in the White House over the witch Hillary Clinton have been taking much heat. Would you believe that somebody in a recent comment under one of my videos called me a Zionist called me a Zionist and said that I'm a Alex Jones Jr. for supporting Trump, when all I've done since day one when this guy started running for president is share with the people what he's been saying. And I have said, Louis, let's see if he does any of the things he said he will do. Sure. Has he appointed some Goldman Sachs folks to his cabinet? Has he done some stuff I don't like? Absolutely. We'll call him out for those things. Let's also call him out for the things he's doing right. I've got just a couple headlines for you. Trump tells business leaders he plans to cut regulations by 75%, maybe more. I'd like everybody to remember Agenda 21 and UN Agenda 2030 policies, which want to destroy our economy. He's also talked about getting us out of the United Nations. Recall people in Oregon being jailed for collecting rainwater, folks. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Trump has also taken us out of the TPP, and he's been praised by union leaders for doing that. I want to play this soundbite for you. Listen to this. That's him signing the executive order.
Okay. Great thing for the American worker, what we just did.
A great thing for the American worker as the snowflakes melt down, still beside themselves, that Trump is in the White House. Louis, let me ask you this. Do you think Hillary the Witch Clinton would have signed an executive order removing the United States from that secretive TPP globalist trade agreement?
Absolutely not. And she would not have put in a hiring freeze on federal workers. She would have not have announced a 75% cut in regulations. So definitely a difference. And as you say, irrespective of what you think of Donald Trump and all of his potential downfalls, those are positive things that would have not have happened under a Hillary Clinton presidency.
Yeah, and let me just say this. For those who want to malign us for reporting the news, this is what the man is doing. And I played this soundbite several times in several videos when Donald Trump was running for the presidency. And it goes a little something like this.
We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. The nation state remains the true foundation for happiness and harmony. I am skeptical of international unions that tie us up and bring America down. And under my administration, we will never enter America into any agreement that reduces our ability to control our own affairs.
All right, and I kept the dramatic music in because what he said was very dramatic, and what he's doing in his first week in office is very dramatic.
But as you're saying, Sean, you are reporting on what he is doing. I gave an interview on X22 and people took the same view that I was cheerleading for Trump. This is before he had even done anything because I was projecting the things that he might do. And because Donald Trump has appointed Goldman Sachs people to his cabinet, they think that negates the fact that he might do any of these things or is actually doing them.
Well, absolutely. And so what we're doing here is we're covering the quantifiables. What has he also said? He says to America's auto CEOs, we're bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. He sets a meeting with big three auto CEOs saying, I want new plants to be built here for cars sold here. Do you know who that reminds me of, Louis? It reminds me of Henry Ford, who said that every worker in his plants should make a living wage so they can buy the cars they build.
It also sounds like something that liberals and leftists should like. It sounds like Ralph Nader and a living wage. He sounds a bit like Bernie Sanders when he talks about almost universal health care. He sounds like Michael Moore when he talks about the forgotten industrial workers of the Midwest. So it seems like people have their own view of how to treat Donald Trump, and it doesn't necessarily square with what the news is coming out.
No, you're absolutely right. And I'll say this. Back in, let's see, when was it? I called the article up. It was in 2012. I wrote an article called What Steve Jobs Should Have Said When He Had the Chance. This was right after he died. And I wrote this. In just one dramatic shareholder meeting before his untimely death, Steve Jobs could have said, quote, "We owe our success to the freedom this great country provides. And from this moment on, we are going to make every single Apple product in the continental United States." End quote. But he didn't. And now we hear that Foxconn, the Chinese company that builds iPhones, is now thinking about bringing one of their plants here to build iPhones. I say scrap it. Circumvent Foxconn. Let's build our own plants. Apple should build their own plants and build those phones here. Anyway, the point is that article, Lewis, reminds me of some of the things that Donald Trump is saying right now.
I agree. And if you think about what people have the problem when confronted with Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, they look at the downsides of both, and there are downsides to both. However, the reason people vote, and they say, they tell us that it's an exercise in democracy, like it's some type of noble deed that you're engaging in. You get to have your say. Really, what it is, you're trying to have your way. You're not having your say because when you vote for something, you're by definition preventing somebody else from getting what they want, and you're voting for what you want. It's the old Bastiat and to Tocqueville, you vote yourself a raise, or at least you vote yourself your own interest. And you could either do that, it's kind of like the stock market, out of fear or greed. You either want to gain something or you want to prevent the loss. And you saw it on both sides of the Trump Clinton. The Clinton people want to prevent this loss that they would see if Trump came in. There are people on the Trump side that thought there was going to be a loss of certain freedoms, so maybe their money and taxes if Hillary Clinton get in. So you vote to get something or to lose something. Then there's people, Sean, that are very much against voting because some people say, well, it doesn't matter. Or libertarians might say, it violates the non-aggression principle because you don't have the right to tell somebody, like voting is an act of aggression. You don't have the right to tell somebody what to do by voting, and therefore they don't have the right to tell you. Well, unfortunately, that's what happens if you don't vote. Someone's going to vote and take something away from you. So you don't really gain anything by not voting. In fact, I want to talk about Lysander Spooner when he talked about the concept of defensive voting. And he said, and this is kind of the situation we all are in, a man finds himself environed by government that he cannot resist. A government that forces him to pay money, render service, and forego the exercise of many of his natural rights under the weighty peril of punishment. He sees, too, the others practice tyranny over him by use of the ballot. He sees, too, further that if he will use the ballot himself, he has some chance of relieving himself from this tyranny of others by subjecting them to his own. So situated, if he uses the ballot, he may become a master, and if he does not use it, he must become a slave. And he has no alternative between the two. So, what Lysander Spooner is saying is, it's self-preservation that causes the man to use the ballot, and he's been forced into that situation. Now, people who voted for Trump, many maybe don't even like what Trump is going to do. Many don't like the nationalism. Many they think it's against free market principles to put up tariffs and so on. However, it might have been worse under Hillary Clinton. So you're voting because Hillary Clinton may have voted to tax you, may have voted to draft your sons or to draft you into a war. So what you're doing, in a sense, by voting for Trump and against Hillary, or if you're on the other side of the aisle, for Hillary and against Trump, you're at least you're defending yourself against those who want to impose their worldview on you by electing a candidate that you might oppose. You could say it doesn't matter, we're still screwed. Neither one's going to set you free, but it's the idea that some people are saying that you shouldn't make a choice between the lesser of two evils. I say, well, you should. If one candidate is going to take your property, your liberty, or whatever it is, it's going to change your way of life, and one way you can prevent that is by voting against that person,
Yeah.
well, I think you're a fool not to vote against that person.
Yeah, I
That
agree.
doesn't mean you endorse the other person.
Well, look, here's what I like. I like your term defensive voting, and I think it's. I wish I had heard that months ago because I would have used it. I essentially said the exact same thing without saying defensive voting as it pertains to Trump versus Hillary Clinton. Look, what the snowflakes like Ashley Judd and Madonna and Meryl Streep and George Clooney either don't understand or do understand and are literally in on it, but maybe they're just willfully ignorant. What they don't understand is that Hillary Clinton was in the pocket of the worst people on earth. Okay, she was in the pocket of the Rothschild central banking family. You know, the $100,000 per head fundraisers held by Lady Rothschild multiple times for the Clintons. The emails, the warm fuzzy email exchanges back and forth between the Rothschilds and Hillary Clinton. And what we would have gotten with Hillary Clinton is the end of what's left of this republic.
And that is not an endorsement of Donald Trump.
No, but standing in stark contrast to her
Correct.
were the words he was saying. And all I had been documenting through the election was listen to what he's saying. Now, here's the thing. I wanted to have this conversation with you because I love your term defensive voting. And I wanted to have this conversation with you because there are many in the libertarian movement, friends of mine, people that would deem themselves anarchists or otherwise, who said if you participate in this election, you're complicit. You need to walk away. You need to disavow yourself of this entire process because the whole process is a sham. And if the rest of the country had heeded that advice, then Hillary the Witch Clinton would be in office because the people like Ashley Judd, Madonna, George Clooney, Meryl Streep, and all of the other leftist snowflakes were damn well going to show up and vote for her. So my point is that somehow, through some miracle, maybe divine intervention itself, Donald Trump made it into the White House, and at least we stand a chance, because under Hillary Clinton, we wouldn't have stood any chance at all.
Well, you know, Murray Rothbard, who is basically the founder of anarcho-capitalism, did write, and I'll have to get the quotes, and he was involved in politics. He realized that the system wasn't proper and that it violated the non-aggression principle, but he also realized that if you just allow the other side to basically do whatever they want, well, then you're really screwed. And you also had, and there was a split in the libertarian community in last election cycle. You had Walter Block come out with a Libertarians for Trump, not because he endorsed what Trump was doing, but because he saw that Clinton would have been worse. And you also had, I don't know if people were watching, if you remember Stefan Molyneux, he was a big, very much an anarcho-capitalist, very much against voting, very much
Yeah,
against
same with
voting.
Jeff Berwick, same thing.
Okay, and Molyneux became almost like a nationalist along with Cernovich about stopping Hillary. I don't know if he ever mentioned he was going to vote for Trump, but he was talking about this in very stark terms about the end of civilization. And basically, he was saying, in a sense, the way you save civilization was by voting for Trump. Now that goes totally against the concept. And you also had that woman, Julie Borowski, who was also against, was for open borders on the principle of libertarian views that free movement of people, free movement of goods, free trade, it's all good. The right people end up in the right places. And then she saw what happened in Germany and she's like, maybe not. So it comes down to you have a philosophy, and at some point you can't eat philosophy. You can only stand on principles so long if your principles are actually working against you. Now you could say, well, I'll just retreat and I don't need a leader and I'll just do my own thing. Well, not if they're going to come for you. Not if they're going to take your money so you can't earn a living, but through excessive taxing. Not if they're going to take your children and put them into wars. You'd be foolish not to vote against that which may harm you if you have the choice. And you can say, well, it's no real choice because now I end up with Trump and I don't like Trump. Well, what's the alternative?
Yeah, well, you said that which may harm you, and of course you were using it as WHICH, and of course I thought of WITCH
That which
because that
that may
which
harm you.
will harm you. And here's the thing. I've got skin in the game, right? I'm willing to be in the game, on the field, fighting the battle, sharing the information. If you want to ride the pines and tell everybody to stand down, go for it. But you really owe it to everybody to be intellectually honest after you find out that the quarterback you were rooting against is actually calling great plays and passing the ball down the field in a way that advances our nation as opposed to signing us off to globalist trade agreements and the United Nations and Agenda 2030 policies. Okay, I don't want to get too excited about this, but I want to call a spade a spade. This is the first week he's been in, and he's already dismantled the TPP. He's talking about getting us out of the UN. He's going to cut regulations by 75%. Look, I worked for a small company. I worked for Target for 10 years at the headquarters in the marketing department as an executive. Then I went back to a small company. And let me tell you, these people they're wonderful people, the people that run this small company I worked for. And you know what they were deadly afraid of every single year? Healthcare costs rising, regulations spinning out of control, and taxes. Those were the three things that kept them from spending and building their business every year. Fear. If this guy's going to come in and he's going to help reduce the fear index for small businesses, he is going to create an economic environment that may help us dig ourselves out of this hole.
Right.
That's just a fact.
Right. He will not introduce this libertarian paradise, this constitutional republic. But what was the alternative?
What was the alternative? And I have continued to be intellectually honest, citing George Webb's work, the Where's Eric Braverman series, about the fact that Trump has appointed Steve Feinberg, partial owner of DynCorp, involved with Cerebus Capital, with ties to George Soros. Steve Feinberg is going to be a Trump advisor. I don't like that. I think that's very bad. That's the deep state. I'm going to continue to document the good and the bad. Right now we're talking about some of the good.
Right, and Trump is for the deep surveillance state, no question about it. So there are downsides, but if you look at on the objective for most people who believe in freedom, Trump would not be your candidate. Everyone says, well, Ron Paul, that was our guy. Yeah, but he had no shot. And Trump actually can do something to stop some of these encroachments. He also will probably put some of his own in place. But that doesn't mean you sit back and you say, well, I have no choice. I don't believe, and I'm with the people who say maybe you're just endorsing the system and maybe it doesn't matter. But I think in this case, it kind of did matter. Between Romney and Trump, Obama, and between McCain and Obama, probably didn't matter.
No, that's right. I've said, and I was saying during the election, you know what this system wanted to give us? They wanted to give us a Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush ticket.
Yes.
That was what they wanted.
They would have won either way.
That's right.
And he would have lost either way.
And now what do we see? We see the Bushes. We see Bush Sr. and his wife in the hospital during the inauguration. I mean, we see Hillary Clinton at the inauguration looking like she was going to vomit on herself. I mean, beside herself. And I see the dying of that. Look,
literally and figuratively is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. I'm not naive to think that this is a panacea.
Correct.
It's not a panacea. The deep state is alive and well. Okay,
and Trump may be part of it, except one of the things that people don't understand, they talk about the elite. There is no the elite. They're competing factions. But one may help you lead your life a little better, a little easier than the other.
One may not want to kill you. Look, the powers that be that have been running this country for the past 30 years wanted to kill us. The Bush Sr., Clinton, CIA faction, right? And that doesn't mean all the people at the CIA are bad. But that faction was on board with the globalist Agenda 2030 policies, right? Arrest people in Oregon for collecting rainwater. Don't let people build on their own properties without the right permits, and then don't approve the permits. Don't let people have access to their own water on their properties.
Okay, and those are the types of regulations, either at the UN level or at the US level,
that are genocidal.
And that Donald Trump sounds like he wants to eliminate. Now, if you live in those areas, would you vote for Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton when Hillary Clinton was on board with those things?
And that was my point. That's my whole point about this entire election. Look,
it's not an endorsement of Trump. It's basically defensive voting. It's saying I don't want them to not allow me to capture rainwater.
I would prefer that they didn't kill me and my family. Exactly, because their policies are genocidal. These were eugenics policies, essentially. These are Rothschild, Rockefeller, eugenics policies, United Nations, Agenda 2030 policies, more for the oligarchs, less for the people. So if this guy's going to come in and try to return any of the power to the people, that's a good thing. It was getting so bad that I had told my wife, if Hillary Clinton gets in office, we need to sell our home and get out of this country. And I was not fooling around. I was very, very serious about this. So now, and we talk about the environment changing, right? The economic environment, the outlook for the country changing.
The social
environment. Now I feel like this is a place I want to be. I want to stay here for the fight. I want to keep him accountable. I want to report on what he's doing. When he does the wrong thing, I want to report on it. But now at least I don't feel like I need to get out of this country.
But here's the difference. What's interesting is the left is united. They didn't have this internal debate. They never thought, well, Hillary is this evil person who's with sort of. They didn't care. In other words, they were always going to vote against Donald Trump. They had no qualms about voting for Hillary Clinton for the most part.
Well, it
And
wasn't just Trump, though. They would have voted against any Republican candidate, but I would have too. None of the rest of the Republican candidates were saying anything Trump was saying. Trump sounded more
no,
like Ron Paul than anybody else. Here's the thing, man. The people on the left have been and will continue to be intellectually dishonest because the most disgusting thing, and the most disgusting thing continues to be them weeping in the streets that the witch didn't get into
right.
office when her crimes are documentable and go back decades.
They
Crimes
ignore
against
those. They
humanity.
believe in the mob rule. They still believe the fact that if 51% vote for something, that the other 49% have to go along. That is not the view of constitutional democratic republic type people. That is the view that they just need to scare up enough votes by any way means necessary, and therefore when they get enough votes, they're going to tell you what to do. And that's why it's essential in a way, even if you don't believe in voting, why you have to vote against that.
Yeah, and the other point I want to make is that a lot of times people in the comments or just people in YouTube videos or, in the space in general, when having this conversation will say Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are two sides of the same coin. And I would like to point out that Donald Trump is not involved, as far as we know, in child trafficking in Haiti. There's not billions and billions of dollars missing from his foundation. He's not involved in look at the Clinton body count. There are not people from all walks of life who have surrounded Donald Trump over the past 30 or 40 years who wound up dead with their hands tied behind their back, 2 shots to the head, found in the woods, and ruled a suicide. Okay? Donald Trump is not the same as Hillary Clinton.
And that doesn't mean that Donald Trump is perfect. You endorse everything he does, and I think that's what most people think when it's always this black or white. It's like, well, no, but Donald Trump is the same. No, he's not, and you can criticize him for a lot of things. But from what we've seen, even if he actually is, even let's say you go along with it. No, Donald Trump is an elitist. He's a Zionist. Whatever you want to say he is, he's part of the same thing. However, if he actually, and let's say it's all a ruse, that he's only doing these things so that the people don't revolt, well, that's still okay.
Well, it's still better than what we would have gotten.
Exactly.
Because what we would have, look, if Hillary Clinton, God, honestly, it's hard for me to express this as eloquently as I would like to. Because if she was sitting in office right now, honestly, I couldn't sell my house fast enough.
No, first of all, your channel would be shut down under the
well,
concept of
exactly.
fake news.
And
The idea of fake news, Donald Trump did everyone a favor when he called CNN fake news. You now have New York Times, Washington Post saying, oh, we can't use that term anymore. Why? Because it got turned against them. They thought the Clintons would have won 10 years ago because they had the right strategy. You just go after everyone and you tell everyone what they believe in is nonsense, and you just browbeat them with these terms, racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever it is, and you win. And then anyone who believes otherwise is fake news, and they shut down the argument. We were lucky that didn't work this time because there were a lot of people in alternative media speaking out. For example, your site got labeled as a Russian agent, which is ridiculous. Now, people saw that as ridiculous, but maybe 10 years ago they wouldn't have. They would have gone along with it, and Hillary would have won on the basis that, there's all these nuts out there that are working for the Russians, and we can't have that, and then the people would have just gone along with it.
yeah. Yeah, no, that's right. And I think that the amazing thing is people in this country have woken up to the fact that the cabal, the Bush-Clinton cabal that had been in control for decades, did not have their best interests at heart. It wasn't even just flyover country. It wasn't. If you look at California, even California was split in half. The point here is that people are waking up. People want to have a chance. People do not want the death agenda to continue. People do not want this country farmed out to the United Nations to be in control. We want a sovereign nation. It gets me back to the soundbite I played from Trump at the beginning. The sovereign state is the source of happiness and prosperity.
That's what Brexit was about, and to a certain extent, I guess that's what they hate Russia for, or Putin.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. And, I highlighted Putin's Christmas speech recently, in which he talks about all of this stuff. And we should leave it here. People who want to debate us on this, fine. That's fine. We can have an intellectual discussion on this, right? But what you can't do is just label us Zionists and ignorant a-holes because of the fact that we weren't willing to stand down and ride the bench and let the chips fall where they may, putting that witch back in, right?
Well,
Which
it
would have
doesn't.
spelt doom for all of us.
I mean, it's almost like you're being accused of being naive for thinking that Trump isn't part of the insiders. Of course, he's part of some insider class. He's got billions of dollars. He knows all of these people. Of course, he's an insider. But that doesn't mean all insiders are monolithically against you, and that all insiders, all of the elite, have the exact same worldview. They can't. They're human beings. They all have different points of view. They all have different interests. And it could be that someone who's in the elite interest may at a certain point intersect with your own. See, I think what people in the alternative media think is that the elite, all of them, every last one of them, is against you. And that anything they want is by nature against you. That may not be true. Just like everyone who ever worked at Goldman Sachs doesn't have to be an elite globalist. They could have just been a banker who worked there.
Well, the other thing, too, is that we have to draw this distinction. It's very important for people to understand that all the snowflakes out there in Hollywood, again, Ashley Judd, Madonna, George Clooney, Meryl Streep, and their ilk, have no problem with the fact that Hillary Clinton's hero was Saul Alinsky. Okay, she's a communist, a Marxist. She has been since she was in college, and these people don't care. Maybe they are too. The point is that Donald Trump appears not to be that.
Also, Sager and Bird.
Yeah, and it's just very important to draw these distinctions because, again, the death agenda, the Rockefeller, Rothschild, United Nations death agenda. If you think that things were going to turn out well for this country under a Hillary Clinton presidency, then you probably don't know a damn thing about Agenda 2030, and you probably ought to look into it. And the fact that Trump, in his first week in office, got us out of this stinking, secretive, globalist TPP is a big deal.
Yeah, and the fact that he's moving the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay, well now he's a Zionist, and that must mean he also is in favor of the United Nations. He's also in favor of Agenda 20. That doesn't mean that. What I'm saying is that there are various shades that one act or one appointment doesn't mean that one is now enveloped in an entire worldview. Because there are people who have, you probably have them too, probably have conflicting points of view with me, and you have conflicting points of view with your audience. But as I mentioned, everyone has intersecting points of view that agree.
Well, yeah, you actually make a good point, and I should mention this. I bring it up a lot. I haven't interviewed him yet, but I'll continue to talk about his work. It's the George Webb YouTube channel. His series was called Where is Eric Braverman, the former Clinton Foundation CEO. And George Webb is as sharp as a tack. He's doing the work that all of the quote-unquote journalists, the mainstream media journalists that have budgets, what was that? Budgets.
Are you playing the
No,
video?
it's my iPhone. I've never seen that. That just proves these iPhones listen to us.
Did you hear what it was? It was talking about Eric Braverman.
It heard me tell you that, and it started to search for Eric Braverman. I didn't ask Siri to do that. It did it on its own. I got to tell you, this is the global Big Brother, police state in action.
I did hear it. I heard Eric Braverman coming through in a
That
female's
was my
voice.
phone searching for Eric Braverman without my authorization. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't ask Siri to search for that. It was this phone listening to me and doing it on its own.
So it just came out.
Yeah, all right. Well, that's interesting. Maybe I can keep that in this conversation because that's just more proof that our devices listen to us even when we think they aren't listening to us. Look, my point is on the Braverman George Webb thing is that George Webb has said he's very, very much in favor of Israel. He's even called himself a Zionist. He's got a very pro-Israel stance, and yet truth is spilling out of this guy left and right. It doesn't matter if the people he's charging with crimes are Israelis themselves, if they are Zionists or not. He's calling a spade a spade. The criminals are criminals. DynCorp, child sex trafficking, the crimes of the Clinton Foundation, etc., etc. And it's all there. He's not allowing his belief system or his heritage to cloud his judgment and to make him be willfully ignorant. He's being
Look,
willfully honest and doing real research. And I think that's what we're all trying to do.
well, here's what it is, Sean. None of us could listen to each other. None of us could watch any YouTube. I see this unsubscribe, unsubscribe, because somebody says something. They generally agree with them on everything else, but they say something that they disagree with. Well, now they're not going to listen to that person. So basically, you can only listen and talk to yourself because nobody agrees with everything you say. Nobody agrees with everything to the degree at which you say it. So that's what this is all about, is having the conversation, throwing out the ideas. It doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to Lewis or I'm not going to listen to Sean because they support Trump. That's not what we're saying. We're saying we support Trump to certain degrees. And and I think what people think is, oh, well, Sean has become, what'd you say, InfoWars light, and now you're just out there and your job in life is to support and promote Donald Trump.
Yeah, yeah, right.
That's not, if you listen to what you say, that's not what you've ever said.
No, it's not what I've ever said. And you know what? I've talked about Zionism and I've talked about the plague of the Balfour Declaration and the Rothschilds. I've talked about all of that, but these people like to pick and choose, right? They like to have selective memory in their charges. We're not going to engage in that. We're not going to allow ad hominem attacks. If you want to have a conversation, then have a conversation. That's cool.
And you also can never convince people. Once somebody has a point of view and you don't have it, you're not going to convince them by calling them whatever name you're going to call them, because we've seen that from the left. Calling you racist, sexist hasn't changed your point of view one way or another. So even when people who generally agree with you, if they're going to start calling you names, that's not going to change your mind either.
Right. Well, again, we'll leave it where it started. All I've tried to do in the election process, and all I will try to continue to do, is share what the man's been saying, right? And then let's see if he backs up his words with actions. That's
Well, that's
all.
what a journalist has to do, is look at what's happening, tell people exactly what's happening, and then provide commentary afterwards.
Hey, do you know what? I mentioned that we're going to talk about precious metals here, and now we're
Yes.
starting to go long. We really ought to touch on that before we lose you. Bitcoin seems to be a place where the world is willing to turn in the midst of this economic tumult we see. How about silver and gold? What do you make of the silver and gold story? Obviously, I still love it. I bought 30 more ounces of silver the other day. I bought some silver Britannias from SD Bullion. What's your stance on silver and gold in 2017, Lewis? Where
Well,
are we
so
headed?
far, we're on the fourth straight week of gains in gold and silver. They're not dramatic gains, but they've been inching up every week. One of the things, I don't know if you saw this, but it's just another example I think everyone should be aware of. You're called a conspiracy theorist for saying gold and silver markets are manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw the Deutsche Bank examples where we have the transcripts showing them manipulating the gold and silver prices through the chats with the other bullion banks. But what I found ironic was someone alerted me to these recently declassified CIA papers where they did a memorandum each year on the gold market. And the biggest irony is the CIA was writing in a memorandum that they suspected the Swiss were manipulating the gold price, and they noticed some curious fixes that they saw happening at each time of the day, and somehow the price of gold always ended up at $35. Now, for the CIA to notice that, that highlights even more how obvious it is. They looked at the free gold market at the time. There was the central bank gold market, but they looked at it and they said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And of course, being rational, they said it looks like manipulation. Now, they, of course, were upset that that was running interference with the manipulation that the IMF was doing with South Africa by buying South African gold always at $35. And they were curious that the Swiss were manipulating the gold price. So where that ties back to where the gold market is today and where we see the gold price, probably it'll continue to be manipulated because by its very nature, being in a futures market, and you can buy or sell unlimited amounts of gold and silver. In fact, you can, I think in a given year, they trade on the paper markets 5 times the amount of the total global supply of gold. And remember, all that global supply of gold is not available for sale, but somehow, it's in people's bullion, wherever they keep it, but somehow the bullion trading, the paper trading managed to turn over 5 times that amount, highlights that with that type of leverage, you can manipulate it. So I'm not that optimistic that this thing is going to take off and match true supply demand dynamics unless there's an actual rush on the physical. And unfortunately, because they've got ETFs and now they got the Chinese trying to buy ETFs, they're trying to make the Indians turn their gold in. So there's this push to make it really paper, really digital, and trying to undermine the physical holdings. Now in silver, it's different. You can't you can't run a computer. You can't run a solar panel on an ETF, silver ETF, or a COMEX contract. So there's some hope that there may be some overwhelming of the physical um, supply dynamic where actually people have to pay more to get their silver. But in gold, people buy gold for protection and for price exposure. And unfortunately, the bulk of the money, the dollars, the yen, whatever it is, goes into these paper contracts.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about the fact that we're not going to see some dramatic breakout anytime soon. Of course, if you watch what Cliff High has been saying with his WebBot research, he was right about Bitcoin, and he's predicting much, much, much higher prices in gold and silver. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. I guess I'd leave folks with this. The other way that silver and gold break out to all-time highs and maybe go well beyond what people thought they could do in terms of dollar pricing is the day the dollar dies, when the world loses faith in the currency, as we see happening in Venezuela, as we will see eventually happening with the Japanese yen.
Well, you make a good point. The gold has hit all-time highs against many third world countries' currencies in the last year. Turkey,
Yep.
Venezuela.
All right, Louis, can you remind people how they can find you? Tell people about your website, will you?
Sure. Smallgold.com. I try to put up something every day or so on the gold and silver markets. Also have a Small Gold YouTube channel, and you can follow me on Twitter. So thank you, Sean, for having me on today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for coming on short notice. I really appreciate it. And guys, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate your support at sgtreport.com. Check us out at thephaser.com, where I hand select interesting videos daily for you. And check us out at thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. Thanks so much for listening. God bless.